Now, Straight Talk. Joe Easingwood on CFAX 1070.
As we continue here for Thursday, I want to bring on the line our next guest, and that would be Dr. Keith Martin, Member of Parliament in the local area. Keith, good morning. Good to talk to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Joe.
There's several things we wanted to talk about, and there was a fair amount of opinion, both good and bad for you, because you abstained from voting. Did you want to just explain that for the audience? I've been getting calls on it.
Well, thanks, Joe. I think the folk, your listeners, we all need to understand exactly what happens in Ottawa.
Right.
When you're the leader of a party, when it whips a vote, that means that all the members of the party have to be in the House and vote the way the leader says.
Yeah.
Now, if you're a member of Parliament who says, no, that's not what my constituents want, for example, in the HST, the parties had the Conservatives and the Liberal parties said that their members had to vote a certain way, which was to support it. What happens when a member of Parliament says, no, I can't do that? So what I did was I said I wasn't going to support this. I wanted to vote against this. If I had stood up and actually voted against it, what happens is you get thrown out of your party.
Mm-hmm.
That's potentially what happens.
Get in line or get out.
That's right. But what happens to you personally doesn't matter. But if you get thrown out of your party, then that negatively affects your ability to work for your constituents quite significantly. And so what I did was I pushed it publicly as much as I could. When this first came out in September, I presented a third way, a series of solutions that would mitigate the negative effects of this tax on people and provide a way that it wouldn't hurt major sectors of our economy, tourism, restaurant, home builders, service sector, as four major ones. And I published that in September of this year, and it's on my website at keithmartin.org. That's the third way I presented. Now, the folks need to understand, some people said, well, why don't you stand up and vote against it? So I say to them, is it really in the interests of the constituents of my riding for their MP to be thrown out of caucus? And it isn't. So what I was able to do is push it as far as I can, and by not being in the House, and I was able to at least not vote for it, while still enabling me to be in the game and fight for my constituents. So that's the way the structure works when a vote is whipped.
So okay, so that's the reason that you voted the way you, or that you didn't vote either way. You abstained.
Yeah, if I'd been in the House, I would have had to stand up and vote for the HST, which I said I would not do, and very publicly I said that. And if I had voted against it, then you run the risk of being thrown out of your party and your caucus, in which case that damages your ability to work for your constituents forevermore. And so that doesn't serve the community at all. No.
Okay, fair enough. There was a fair amount of criticism, and I think you've explained it, whether people agree with it or not. That's exactly what you did and why you did it. Now, by the way, you were called a coward in several cases on that. That was another crucial part of that. There were two or three saying that Martin was a coward. He ducked.
Well, it's interesting because I took probably the most vocal position in
No, this
Canada.
Was on the vote itself, yeah.
Oh, but I stood up actually and presented a third way to deal with this, and secondly was saying that this is a very bad tax at this point in time, and there are ways of making it better. As opposed to all the Conservative MPs who voted for it. No one says a word about them at all.
No.
And Mr. Harper's hand is the one that's been pushing on Premier Campbell's back to push this forward, and nobody says anything about that. So when you stand up and take a stand on it, people are accusing you of being a coward, even though if I had actually stood up and voted, what I would have done is damaged my ability to serve my constituents. And that's the calculus that you have to I think, go through. You push it as far as you can, and to the breaking point. But if you push it past the breaking point, you actually damage your ability to serve your constituents, and that's not something I'm going to do. You're bringing up an interesting point, Joe, because when I compared the HST in Ontario and I compared what happened in the Maritimes, in the Maritimes, when they amalgamated the tax, they dropped it 4 points, and a lot of the products already had their provincial tax applied. So in our province, I said, why don't we apply if you're going to harmonize the tax, then harmonize it to that which the PST applies to. Don't harmonize it to something that the PST doesn't apply to, because what you're doing is you're going to put 7% tax on a lot of things that never had that tax on. Drop it 2 percentage points. Consult and keep the incentive package that Mr. Harper has on the table for a year, and he's got to take his hand off the back of Mr. Campbell and stop pushing this and trying to ram it through so quickly. And you've got to consult with the private sector and with consumers to introduce factors that will mitigate the harmful effects this will have on certain parts of our economy and members of our community of modest means. And so it's going to. Why are we introducing something that it will have certainly some benefits to certain areas, but it's going to hurt other areas? Why don't we do what some other areas did and implement things that are going to not hurt major sectors of our economy and individuals in our communities?
One email here from Phyllis says, good morning. I found out that Nova Scotia, who has harmonized sales tax, does not have its citizens pay medical premiums. As a result of HST, the government covers medical payments for everyone and dental to the age of 10 for that category. She wants to know, have you heard anything about that?
I have not, but in Ontario, for example, they're introducing the HST, but they have 11 other instruments that are going to mitigate the negative effects for individuals. But in our province, we've sort of tinkered around the edges.
Yeah, there's no benefits here.
Well, the benefits for the business, anybody that produces things. There will be benefits for them, to be sure.
Yeah.
And some sectors of our economy, like forestry, the manufacturing sector will benefit. But other sectors, major drivers of our economy, particularly here at home, restaurant sector. Imagine this, Joe. The restaurant sector, it's estimated that it's going to cost our province, our restaurants, $760 million a year.
I know, it's huge.
Those are jobs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And at this time, when people are hurt with this economic tsunami that's hit us, why on earth are we piling on taxes onto people who are living hand to mouth?
Well, the government tells us through Gordon Campbell that it'll be revenue neutral. That's for government, all right, and for big business, I guess. But for the average person, is out on his own or her own. You know, there's no compassion and there's no reason to explain their actions.
Well, you're right. That's the issue, isn't it? That we don't have to ram this through so quickly. Why don't we be sensitive and listen to the people of our province to implement things that are going to prevent harm? And we have a saying in medicine, it's do no harm. So why don't we apply that same principle in politics? And here's a great example where we could actually lessen the harm in a big way by implementing things that are going to reduce the harm on our folks. And I'm just dismayed. And what I tried to do over the last few months is show a third way and stand up and say, here are ways that we can mitigate the harm that this is going to do to certain segments of our province.
I don't know where the Campbell government's going on this, because during the election campaign, he said they would never harmonize the two sales taxes. Well, that happened, and it happened in a couple of other areas. How do you trust this guy anymore?
Well, I think it's Prime Minister Harper's hand that's been pushing at the back of Premier Campbell and Premier McGuinty on.
You mean making the liar out of him?
Well, they put what Mr. Harper. I mean, he's kind of got off scot-free. He dumped this onto the floor of Parliament, and then he ran off to China. And what he's done, he's put a $1.6 billion carrot on the table, and has said to the province, "You do this HST in a short order, and you will have $1.6 billion check coming to you, which will help our province, obviously, with the deficits we have." That's a pretty attractive carrot for Premier Campbell to take so he can reduce his budgetary deficit.
An easy way to sell off your veracity, truthfulness, too, isn't it?
Well, I think it's Mr. Harper's hand that's pushing hard at Premier Campbell's back, and what I hope that Premier Campbell does is push back a little bit and saying, okay, well, let's hold off for a second here, and let's start to look at ways which we can mitigate the negatives. And he can do that, and I certainly hope that he does.
Don't count on it. Do not count on it, my friend. Our guest at this point of the program is Dr. Keith Martin, a local MP, and our number is 250-386-1161.